What's up guys, how you doing? Welcome to another video. Today we're talking about the Canon R6. I've been using it for nearly 18 months now. I'm going to share my thoughts. I've been using it real world for sports, in part of my professional work. I'm going to tell you what I love, what I don't like so much, and my overall thoughts on the camera, having used it extensively. Before we get into it, I'm going to ask you guys to do all of the usual YouTube stuff for me. Hit that like button, it helps me out loads and loads on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Loads of other videos to come on the channel that I think you might enjoy. If you're here specifically for the Canon R6, look back on my channel. I've done loads of Canon R6 videos that you might find useful. So as I said, today's video is going to be all about my use of this camera over the course of the last 18 months. You guys who don't follow the channel regularly, I use this alongside a Canon 1DX, and those are my two main camera bodies that I use for all of my work. That's predominantly sports work, but it's also events, portraits, and other stuff as well. This video is not necessarily going to be like a scientific breakdown of specs, although we are going to talk about some of the specs along the way. This is more of a real-world experience, and through the course of the video, I'm going to chuck some photos in that were all taken on this camera so you can see some of the examples of what I'm talking about. I'm going to talk about what I love, I'm going to talk about what I hate, and spoiler alert, there's not really much I hate about this camera, but I'm going to talk about some of the things that do frustrate me a little bit, or that I wish were just that little bit better. Right, let's get into this, and first of all, we're going to talk about the stuff I love. And straight in, with me predominantly being a sports photographer, the first thing I love about this camera is the autofocus. I find it so good. Now, I use a couple of different tracking modes in this camera. I use the face recognition, and that's the thing that probably gets talked about a lot with this camera. I use that quite a bit. I use it for portraits. I find myself jumping into it during sports events, especially if I'm doing something like warm-ups of an individual player, photos of the manager, stuff like that. Although when it comes to actual sports action, I do find it can jump around a little bit, and it focuses on different faces as you go. Because of that, when I'm shooting the actual action, I don't use the facial recognition. Instead, I go to the single point focus. Sometimes I use the little kind of expanded cross one, but predominantly the single point focus, and generally I have that sent to the center spot. For all of my sports and action, I'm always shooting it at a servo mode, and for that I find it so good. I rarely ever find images that miss focus with this camera. Of course, as with anything, you'll get some if you have someone running diagonally across and towards you at the same time, and those really challenging autofocus situations, of course you get the occasional misfocus, but that really is occasional, and I would say the hit rate with this is higher than my 1DX, and you guys who are familiar with the 1DX, you know that's already pretty high, so I really do find it good. I have basically zero autofocus concerns with the Canon R6. So moving into the second thing I love, and that is how well this works with all of my EF lenses. Now, I use the adapter. I just use the basic one. It's the official Canon one, although I have tried out the Viltrox one. I did a video on that. It's on my channel if you want to find it. This is just the basic one. It doesn't have the like adapter ring on it, or the ring where you can kind of customize it. It's just the simple adapter, and I use this. With that, I fit my EF 400 f2.8. That's the IS Mark 1, and then I also use the 70 to 200. That's also the IS Mark 1 on this camera, and they both work really well. Loads of my other EF lenses too, my 24-70, my 17 to 40, all of those lenses, I basically have had zero problems with any of them. They work flawlessly with the adapter, and I really love that. I was worried, you know, was I going to find that it was okay, but really kind of to get the best from it, I had to move into the RF range, and actually no, not at all. The EF lenses work flawlessly with it. Love that. It means I can move into the mirrorless world without the pressure of having to change all of my lenses at the same time. So really pleased with that. Fantastic. Okay, moving into the third thing I love. Now, this might be a silly one for a lot of you guys, but for me, it's a huge one. I absolutely love the flip out screen. This is the first time I've had a camera with a flip out screen. You guys will know I used the 7D for a while, the 7D Mark II, the 1DX, I used a 1DX, a 1D4 for a short while. None of those have the flip out screen. When I moved to the EOS R, that did have the flip out screen, but only had that for a very short time before moving to the R6. And for me, the flip out screen is so good. Firstly, because I do a lot of video, right? Normally my YouTube videos are filmed on this camera because this video is about the camera. I'm shooting this on the 7D Mark II, but normally my videos are filmed on this, and to have the flip out screen so that I can see what I'm doing is so useful. I really do love that. It's good for photography too. I do lots of like huddle shots where I will lean in and have to look over the top, and to be able to tilt the screen back so you can kind of get that camera up high and you can see what you're doing, I find that really, really good. Versatile, love the flip out screen. Look, for me, just every single camera should have it now, and it seems that Canon kind of agree because the R3 has it. I would assume the R1 is probably going to have it as well. Flip out screen, really, really good. Okay, moving on from there, and I kind of touched on it in the last point. That is the versatility of this camera. Now, I find, of course, I use it for sports, but it's good for so much more than that. It's a really versatile camera when it comes to video. Now, yes, if you have something like the R5, you can shoot 8K and all that kind of stuff, but actually, I don't need 8K. I'm shooting YouTube videos. I can shoot 4K when I want to. I can shoot 1080p, which actually is what I do most of. I can get the higher frame rates for the slow motion when I need it. The autofocus tracking for video is really good. It's got the in-body stabilization. It's just so versatile between the photo and video. Sticking in the photo world, we have the 20 megapixels, right? And a lot of people, well, the 20 megapixels isn't enough. It is. In fact, just recently, someone got in touch with me who wanted like a big blown up poster, and I created a poster that was like 40 by 50 inches. It was huge. And yeah, if you wanted to really pixel peep, you maybe could have noticed a couple of tiny little bits, but it was fine, and the person who bought it from me was really pleased with it. They certainly didn't notice anything. So 20 megapixels is more than enough. That's really versatile for the speed of doing something like sports. It's also good for events and portraits. I've shot portraits with this 20 megapixel sensor, no problem whatsoever. Really, really versatile camera, and I absolutely love that. Okay, moving on from there. That is the size and weight of this little camera. Now, don't get me wrong, there is something, I guess, within the macho part of me that loves the absolute tank that the 1DX is. But in reality, after you've been carrying it around all day, the fact that this is cool and it looks great and it's, hey, this massive camera, after you've carried it around for a few hours, you don't care about that. You love the fact you've got the smaller, lightweight body. So versatile, just as capable as this camera here, but half the size. I know you guys are going to say, yeah, but what about the grip? But hey, look, if you want that, get a grip, stick the grip on there. Got so used to that actually now, when I've been using this for a while and then I switched to my 1DX, I do almost find myself like, oh, this heavy old camera. I haven't taken full advantage of that yet because I'm still using my heavier EF lenses on here, but if you do start to move towards the RF range, even the 70-200's like a tiny little lens on there. Really compact, really cool. Moving into the next thing that I love about this camera, and that is the electronic shutter. Now, there's loads of people who seem to be nervous about using that electronic shutter, and when people message me and say, oh, do you ever use the electronic shutter for sports? I think, yeah, like, ever use it? I use it all the time. I find it so good. Pretty much all of my football photos, my soccer photos, are all taken using the electronic shutter. I have occasionally, and I mean occasionally, noticed a couple of issues shooting basketball. And because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, I do then shoot my basketball with the mechanical shutter instead of the electronic shutter, just because I don't want to risk anything. But that said, I know there are other sports photographers that I've seen on Instagram, stuff like that, who say that they still shoot sports like basketball with the electronic shutter. And to be fair, even when I did do that, my hit rate was probably still like, you know, 90-95% fine. So there's probably nothing to worry about. But the electronic shutter overall is fantastic. Any kind of events, portraits, sports, I shoot pretty much everything with the electronic shutter, apart from, as I said, anything really fast moving like basketball, volleyball. I guess maybe I'm just slightly nervous, but overall the electronic shutter, fantastic. I love it. 20 frames per second. You can't get much better than that. Well, again, unless you buy the R3, but hey, let's forget about that. Next thing I love is the electronic viewfinder. Now, I always thought that I was going to find an electronic viewfinder a bit weird. I thought I wasn't going to like it. You know, I wanted to better see what I was actually seeing through the viewfinder, but after just a few times of using it, I got over that straight away. Once you get used to it, you don't even register that you're looking at a screen and not just an actual picture, but of course the bit you get, the bit that is just undeniably better better is the fact that you get a live view of your exposure and what your image is going to look like. That's just so useful. I find that to be so much better than my 1DX, and the fact I go back to my 1DX viewfinder and it's this dark image because I'm seeing what's actually there rather than the projected exposure. I just find that really good. It works really well, it's so responsive, really love it, fantastic. And moving on to the last thing that I love about this camera is the all-round image quality. I find it really good. I love how the colours come into Lightroom and I can edit my images from there. I quite like the kind of base it gives you with the raw images. I don't find anything too contrasty or too oversaturated. I find it gives me a really good starting point to be able to edit the images to my style, how I like them in Lightroom. That's the program I use for all of my editing. The overall image quality for me, lovely. Kind of within this point, I'll also talk about ISO performance. It's great. I didn't want to kind of use it as a specific thing that I love, but the ISO performance is fantastic, and that kind of feeds into the image quality. I was on a forum the other day and someone said, oh, I worry with my R6 going above like 4000 ISO, and I thought, what, like why? Like, I mean, I would without even hesitation shoot this at 8000, 10,000, and the images are totally fine. So whether or not that person was struggling with something else, I don't know, but ISO performance, overall image quality, really, really good. Okay, look, we got to talk about some of the stuff that maybe I don't quite like. So let's get into it. First thing I'm going to talk about is the weatherproofing. Now, I should say, I haven't had any weatherproofing issues with this camera, but I am forever aware that it is not fully weatherproof in quite the same way that the 1DX is. Sometimes when I was at games and it used to rain a little bit, I didn't really worry. I use rain covers all the time anyway, even though this is weatherproof. But I suppose, you know, a little bit of drizzle, a little bit of downpour, I'm not too worried. If this gets a bit wet through the course of an event, it doesn't faze me. Whereas I do find myself becoming really paranoid about that with the R6. I'm forever worrying, oh, is my rain cover on nicely? You know, is it covered up if I put it down? Oh, hang on, have I got it under a towel or something? I just feel nervous, and don't get me wrong, it's not going to have water like chucking it into the camera if it rains, because I believe it is rated as like weather resistant or something like that they called it, but I am aware that it isn't as well weatherproofed as the 1DX, and that does make me a little bit nervous. The R3 is supposed to be like fully weather sealed, which I guess is one of the things where you pay the extra for, and so I guess that's just one of the things you have to accept if you want to pay less than half the price and get yourself an R6. So moving into the next thing, and I kind of touched on this earlier about the battery grip. I still don't have a battery grip for my R6, and I kind of wish I did, because whilst it doesn't bother me, every now and again having to like go up and shoot over the top like this, it does get annoying, especially if you're shooting a sport like basketball, where I do find a lot of it is shot in portrait mode. However, I'm not going to buy the battery grip yet, because I still can't get over the fact that it will cost you like £400. That just seems way overpriced, seems ridiculous, and I just kind of feel aggrieved, and I don't want to spend the money. I could just get over it and spend the money, but I'm not going to. So that's one of the things that annoys me, the price of the battery grip. Okay, moving into one that I know is going to alarm people slightly, because I've heard about this before. I really actually find this quite a minor issue, and it's never like caught me out or caused me a problem. But I imagine it could in certain situations. And that is that I find every now and again, this camera will take a couple of seconds to wake up. Now what I mean is, if you're using the camera, you've taken some photos, then for whatever reason you take a minute away from it and you move into using like your other camera body if you're shooting with two bodies, or perhaps you just got a break in play and you put it down for a second. Every now and again, when I grab it back up and go to shoot, it takes a second to wake up. And what I mean is, you normally straight away, you get the live view in the viewfinder, but the autofocus square and the other information just takes that second to appear. The camera seems to be working fine, like I can see the autofocus kicking in, but I don't have the actual information grid on the middle of the screen. We're literally talking like a 1 second delay sometimes. But it does bother me. You know, I'm so used to maybe picking up the 1DX, which is obviously automatic, and bang, you're there and you can see and you're taking your photos. That slight delay does frustrate me sometimes. I've never missed a shot with it, and I know there'll be people saying, oh, but you can turn off the sleep mode. Yeah, you can, but then I have to be wary of battery life, and you know, it's just something that kind of annoys me, and I wish it didn't do it. I'm gonna see if I can get it to do it and like film the back of the camera. I might not be able to. If I did, you're gonna see that happening in the video right now. If I couldn't manage to catch it on film, then hey, you just have to take my word for it. But it's not like a massive issue, but it does frustrate me every now and again. I pick up the camera, like, you know, kick, and then kicks in and bang, I'm taking the photos. But just that split second, you know, if you were like an events photographer or maybe like a wedding photographer, that could be a much bigger issue. Something maybe to be aware of. Now my next point, and what I should say is there is a way to get around this, but I don't like the fact that this does not have a LAN network plug in the sockets on the side. I'm used to having that with my 1DX, and it would be cool if I could get it with the R6. Now I said that before in a previous video, and someone mentioned actually you can buy one of the grips that has the LAN network port in it, and of course you do have Wi-Fi. You know, there are other ways you can get adapters, there are other ways you can do it. And I know that the R3 does have the LAN network, but it would just be a nice to have if the R6 did too. Again, I suppose that's what I get if I don't want to spend double the money for the R3, but it's just one of those things that would be cool if I could have it in the R6. So look, overall, that is my thoughts on the Canon R6 after 18 months of using it. Now, occasionally here through the video, I've put in a couple of photos. I'm going to put in more now as I'm talking about it. All of these photos have been taken using the Canon R6. For the price, it's just amazing. You can get something more expensive, the R5, the R3, the upcoming R1, but that's so much more money, and I would really struggle to be convinced that the difference in price is worth the difference in performance between this and those cameras. To some people, it will be worth it, but you know what? It's all about shooting the best you can get with your budget, and right now, my budget doesn't afford me 2 Canon R3s. It does afford me an R6 and a 1DX, and probably my next move will be to get a second R6 or maybe the R7 once we hear about that and the details are confirmed, who knows, but very likely could be a second R6. That probably in itself tells you my overall thoughts. I've been using it for all my professional work for 18 months. I love it. I'd recommend it to anybody. No problems whatsoever. Hope you guys found that useful. If you did, do me a favor, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Loads of other videos coming on my channel about the R6, about the R7 if it gets released, hopefully about the R3 real soon. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next video.